It just seems like a lot of people are just like running campaigns like it's 2007 or it's 2017 or 2019, even though 2019 wasn't very far away. It's, 4 or 5 years ago. A lot's changed within, the Google Meta platforms over the last couple of years. And so people need to shift how they run campaigns and ad accounts to the way things should be run in a 2024 world.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Super excited to be chatting with Duane Brown, who's the CEO and founder of Take Some Risk. So let's start with the origin story behind Take Some Risk, and not just the name, but sort of what the catalyst was, Duane.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Kevin. I'm always honest about this. I was bored at my last job. So I quit my last job, and my intent was never to start an agency. I just went to freelance and, pay my bills. I think like many people out there, I figured maybe one day I'd get a job somewhere else. And that was true for maybe the first 2 or 3 years. And then obviously the pandemic happened, and there were tons of work. And there was just a choice of, do you do your own thing? Do you hire people? And there's not saying I always think about, and I don't know if it was someone famous said it or maybe a sports person said it, but the idea, if you want to like go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go as a team. And thinking about, times I enjoyed my career, there have been times where I've enjoyed working in a group. It's not like college, university, where you work in a group and somebody doesn't do the work. So I thought, why don't I try to build a team based on, my values, the things I think make a good team. I keep the team sort of maybe on the smaller size, because as you scale up and have more people, you got more problems, more money, but more problems. And then the company name, is, I think, how I think about life a little bit. I realized to get to each stage of life or each chapter, depending on how you view things, I've had to take certain amounts of risk. I think there are different degrees of risk. There's big risk and small risk. And I realized, clients are very similar in that if they want to get to a certain goal, like let's say a store has $500,000 in revenue from their website. Maybe they're mostly B2B, or maybe they do a lot of wholesale, or maybe they do a lot of like retail because they own their own retail stores. If you want to grow your online store and go from 500,000 to 1 million, you're probably going to have to take some risks to get there, right? Because to go from 500,000 to 1 million is actually really hard. It's probably one of the bigger gaps versus going from 1 million to 2 or 1 million to 3. Because you almost have to reinvent your business at that scale because you're trying to sell more of, your hero products. And so, even though grammatically it would be like take a risk because you want someone to take one risk, I realized I've taken many risks to get here. So Take Some Risks made more sense as a company name. It wasn't taken as a domain name. My government let me incorporate under that name because it was unique enough. And so that's kind of how I came up with the name. Think about it for, a couple of weeks, and I want the name to be something that I think embodies who we are as a company. I've certainly taken lots of risks to get here. We're closing in at finishing our 7th year in business, which I feel both grateful for and honored for, because it's not easy to have an agency let alone survive. And that's kind of how we got to where we are today, so to speak.
Great. Well, congrats on that. And you do speaking engagements. So we'll both be at the Brighton SEO conference, which, despite the name, is in San Diego. They have one in Brighton as well, but this is the US version. So what will you be covering in your session at Brighton?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to talk about something I normally don't talk about at conferences, ironically. Mostly at conferences, I usually talk about like Google Ads, Google Shopping, Shopify e-commerce. But my topic actually at the conference is more around like agencies and how to bill and how to make more money, and sort of my viewpoint on that. My viewpoint on that's probably contradictory to a lot of people. You hear a lot of people say, oh, you should only charge like a flat rate, or you should only do this, you only should do that. Or lots of agencies say we should like give away an audit for free or give away an account review for free. And I believe actually the opposite of that. You should actually give away things for free, because if everybody's doing something, how does that make you different as an agency? You can't say you're different, but then do what everyone else does, which is like do a free audit or do a free account review. In fact, you'd have to do the opposite of that, which is what we do, which is charge if people want to know like what you think about their ad account, whether it's a review or an audit, versus giving away for free and wasting time. Because the dirty secret is, if you do, let's say, 50 or 100 free audits or account reviews in a year, well, you're not going to win all of those. That's like literally impossible. Nobody bats 100%. And so how many of those are you losing? And then, how much of that is free work, right? The challenge of agencies is, there's X amount of people, they're working on X accounts. Lots of agencies have people who may be overworked. That means these people now have to take time and do free work on things they're not going to win, is why most agencies are just stressed out and burnt. And so I decided to get rid of all of that and say, if you want to know what we think, we're going to charge for it. Otherwise, I'm going to sit over here where my clients are and they're paying us versus working for you for free at the chance that I might win your business, even though there's 5 other people doing the exact same thing. And you're hoping to see who gives you the best plan.
Yeah, well, I'm actually 100% agreed with you on that. Because of not just the reason that you mentioned, but to get buy-in, right? Because obviously, they basically think you get what you pay for, right? And so a lot of times they won't even look at a free audit, or the free audit, because it's free, needs to be much more surface level. And so a lot of audits we end up doing on my team end up being either for VCs or private equity firms, right? And those are deep dive audits because they have to do with business valuation, identification of risk, and identification of upside, right? And so those have to be buttoned up. And so, certainly at a very different level than you might do for free. So I agree with you 100%. Knowledge is power, and if you're going to give people power with your knowledge, you should get paid for it, with the possible exception of when you do speaking engagements or write books or blogs or whatever, and you're sort of using some of the knowledge as a teaser to let people know that, by the way, you thought everything was great and it's not. You've
Yeah.
only scratched the surface of something.
Yeah, and those
So
things are also different because you're helping lots of people, right? Like
yeah,
at a certain scale, and you're choosing to do that stuff for
right.
free, right? Versus here is like, yes, you're choosing to do the audit for free, but you're giving someone who would normally pay you free work, which doesn't really work out in this end. It's a very different, use case.
Right, right. So, within your name and within paid media of all types, and even earned media, and including SEO, you need to do testing, right? And testing requires, identification of risk, because you're setting aside a certain percent of your budget to try new things. It could be new keywords, new platforms, a different account structure, new ad types, etc. So there's always a risk reward calculus that you need to do, especially if you need to justify it to a client. So what's your philosophy on risk reward versus sort of the safe path?
Yeah, I mean, the only safe thing is really you need to change. Staying still too long usually means things won't work in the long run. All things being equal, there's sort of a couple things we do. One, we try not to spend more than 10% of our budget on any given month on sort of any test we're going to do. And even 10% on the high end, closer to 5% is usually a good number, depending on obviously how much this client is spending, because we found when you start to hit the 10% mark, if the test, was a complete failure and didn't work out, well, now you've got that money you've spent that you've got to, obviously include within your overall performance. And anything higher than 10% usually starts to tank the account performance overall. Some people don't think, 10% is very much, but it's kind of like if you've gotten 4 A's in school and a D, well, that D is going to drag down your whole average for the semester or for the year. So we generally try to stick within 10%. When it comes to running tests. But beyond that, something we do that's kind of unique in some ways is people generally launch tests whenever, right? Which in some ways is a great idea, but all things being equal, we try to launch tests towards the end of a month with clients, because that way we already have an idea of, like, if it's the 20th or 25th of the month, where do you know what the first 20, 25 days of the month looks like and what performance is? So we understand at that point, how much could we spend on a failed test and still hit the client's goal at the end of the month. And then, of course, if the test was successful or even moderately was successful, then we have that less worse performance to not have to worry about as much. And so, yeah, we try to launch towards the end of the month, try to do 10% of the budget or less, depending on what the client's spending that month. And that sort of mitigates the risk. And beyond that, looking at different potential outcomes, different tests will have different kind of success. If we're going to break out SKUs in a campaign, it's very different than potentially launching a brand new brand new campaign about something we've never tested before. And so we look at all the options we have and figure out like, what's the best chance of success out of all these? Which one do you think will work based on what's already working in the ad account? Because often when we run tests, we're trying to build on our current success so that we can also get more success, which means clients would make more revenue, we spend more money, which are all good things. And so we try to calculate, what we think is going to have the best chance of success. And not everything works out. Clients realize that. But if you can learn something from something that failed, that's also valuable because then you could potentially take that learning and apply it to future tests you're going to run as well.
Right, absolutely. Another conversation that probably your teams and my teams have a lot is the learning fast versus learning slow, right? And with a lot of these platforms, internally, they rely on data, especially if you're empowering them to make any bidding decisions, and things like Performance Max, for example, and even if you're at the controls with your team, right? The sooner you get a statistically valid sample, the sooner you know whether something worked or not, right? So there's a huge advantage to learning fast, or as some people say, I think in venture capital, failing fast. And that just doesn't necessarily resonate with clients as much. So it freaks clients out when you sometimes say, oh, I want to put a heavy budget behind this thing really quickly, so that the AI at the engine or platform can learn, but also so that we can learn quickly, do we have a winner here, or is this going to be a loser? So are there any strategies you have for other folks who are trying to convey to clients, listen, we're better off if we learn fast?
Yeah, obviously, learn fast or how much you spend is relative to what a client is spending right now.
Right.
What you do for a client who maybe spends $5,000 a month because maybe they only target one state or one province versus a client who maybe does something nationally and they're spending 20 or 50 or $100,000 a month. I think the way we looked at it as clients is, a goal is to ultimately earn our clients' trust. And, it comes to a point to where, we tell clients what we're going to work on, but oftentimes a lot of clients just want us to like take this work off their plate. So they're not always worried about the nitty gritty and stuff like that. So we always just basically say, here's a test we want to run, why do we want to run it? Or why do we think it might be successful? Obviously you never guarantee that it's going to be successful. We want to test that to see if we can get better performance, because if you don't try anything, there's no way to find out something's going to do a better job for you. And then, ideally we want to try to have more successes than failures in any account. The hardest account always to do is the account that wants to start from scratch. It's a new business, or they've not done anything on Google or anything on Meta or anything on TikTok and stuff like that. So I think it's just relative to the client and just trying to figure out what makes the most sense. And hopefully it is successful.
Right. Well, clearly, both of our teams do audits. What are some paid audits, except in some rare cases for friend maybe. So, what are some common mistakes you see in paid media audits, whether within search or within other platforms that you do audits for?
Yeah, obviously the big one I think in a lot of ways is, potentially conversion tracking isn't set up to the best of the ability, especially with, Google getting rid of Universal Analytics back in July, and now we have GA4. So that transition, can be tumultuous for some brands. So I think one thing we've seen a lot of the last few months is just double checking like conversion tracking's working. They're on double counting conversions or it's not broken. And then beyond that, outside of maybe whether it's, in-house people or people at an agency or a freelancer or a contractor, I think people just spend enough time on accounts. There's a shift or a change in performance, and maybe it was really small at the end of August, but now we're at the end of October, and that small thing you saw has grown, but you haven't noticed it's grown and become a worse of an issue. So I think it's really important that people double check their work. I still double check my work, and I've been doing this for 17 years. I stress to our team to double check your work, right? If you've watched a new campaign or you changed a setting or you've done something, go back at the end of the work day before you leave and just like spend 50 minutes to double check that everything you did was actually correct. You didn't like miss out and target in the wrong country or state, or you didn't like add an extra zero to a budget. It should have been $100, but you put $1,000 in there by mistake. Mistakes happen, and it's often when you don't double check your work that a mistake doesn't get caught, and then you've got to explain to a client why you spent more money or targeted the wrong country and stuff like that. I think lately, the big thing we also see is, a lot of people on the Google end of things, we'll just put Performance Max for everything. And though I think Performance Max as a campaign type is good in lots of ways, I don't think we're at the point where it could be the only campaign you run in an ad account. And so understanding, how are you going to use Performance Max and understanding, how it plays with other campaign types you have, whether it's standard shopping, search campaigns, some people may still be running discovery ads, but that's getting sort of upgraded to demand gen is a new campaign type we will launch this month out of beta. And so just understanding how things play together from campaign types of Google. I think on the Facebook end, we still see a lot of people when it comes to meta and stuff like that, they'll have almost too many campaigns. Or they'll have too many ad sets, right? And their budget, whether it's big or small, is getting distributed too quickly across too many ad sets and campaigns that they actually can't figure out, what's working and what's not. I think the one thing that is consistent across both Meta and Google is, less campaigns is probably better than more, all things being equal. That way you can collect enough data within each campaign to understand like what is or isn't working. If you don't have enough data, platforms can optimize, but then also you can optimize just as a human being to understand like what's working and what's not. People often make the classic mistake of trying to do too much. When you do too much, you often fail because then it's kind of like you get your car stuck in mud. You're going to spin your wheels, but not go very far. People get really, I think, excited when they do paid advertising, so they want to do everything, but you have to make sure your budget can support the things you want to do. Even times when clients ask us to do stuff, we're like, well, we'd love to do that, but we'll explain, we can't do that because we don't have the budget, or it doesn't make sense to do it this month because we're already running this one test or these two tests maybe for a bigger client. So I think really making sure people prioritize how they're doing things and what they're doing is also really important. Because we're looking at a lot of audits lately, it just seems like a lot of people are just like running campaigns like it's 2007 or it's 2017 or 2019, even though 2019 wasn't very far away. It's 4 or 5 years ago. A lot's changed within the Google Meta platforms over the last couple of years, and so people need to shift how they run campaigns and ad accounts to the way things should be run in a 2024 world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree with you with the Performance Max situation that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and we almost always are running in parallel. Semi-manual or auto-bidded campaigns using other bid management platforms as well as Performance Max. And another thing that we see, account structure issues are pretty common. Often people who set up accounts don't realize that your quality score will have a lot to do with your account structure, especially once you get down to the bottom of the account structure at the ad group level. And a poor structure there will essentially penalize you, and you'll get a lower quality score. That just ripples through the whole campaign. And so getting fresh sets of eyes on that when you take over an account initially is super important. I'd love your thought on one other thing that we see a lot, which is failure to take post-conversion metrics into account when you're optimizing campaigns. So whether it's B2B clients that we've got or B2C clients, we try to use back-end data, business intelligence data, to understand LTV really well, right? Because there's always a huge difference between the average customer and the power customer. And the extent to which you can use that to predict which media channel they came in on, and then could get down and granular to the keyword level, but it could also be geography or a bunch of other targeting levers we have at our disposal. Failure to optimize around LTV means you're missing a huge opportunity. And we find a lot of folks just don't even have the back end business intelligence to know what their power customers look like and where they came from and what they have in common with each other. I don't know if you see that as well.
Yeah, I think that does happen. I think that kind of goes along the lines of sort of conversion tracking, but to the next level in terms of like data. It's one of those things you also have to set up in advance.
Yeah, of course.
Usually you can't like say, hey, I want to look at all this information today. But we find, I think there's a lot of people there who think they can just like walk into their store today and they just grab all this data, but you haven't set up the systems to collect the data in the correct way. So you can look at this, 6 months, a year later. It often becomes a hard thing. And so that's one thing we do when we onboard a client is also try to understand, what their tech stack looks like and where information sits, and try to help clients, consolidate data where it makes sense, get rid of some tools or technology. there's often orphaned tools and technology at most clients that they can get rid of stuff and consolidate stuff across tools. And so, yeah, well, a lot of our clients are Shopify, so we'll get backend data of Shopify. A good chunk of our clients are sort of B2B e-com, so we'll get things like their CRM and pull what data we can from there. And yeah, try to understand sort of like where the best clients come from, where the best customers come from, and try to figure out sort of what makes you unique and how do we try to target more of those people. And
Exactly.
then even just try to get things like if clients don't have call tracking set up, call tracking is really valuable if you're in sort of a lead gen, B2B e-com space. And so we definitely do it. It sometimes obviously just takes longer than we'd like, as I'm sure you can agree, Kevin, because clients can't do everything we want right away. So we got to prioritize what we do work on. That's always one of our long-term goals is have clients get better data, which helps them just in general, but usually also helps us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a prioritized punch list is key as you work through an engagement with a client. So GA4, right, is out and
Mhm.
deployed, and a lot of stuff disappeared that people got used to and is missing from GA4. So you've got folks who are used to seeing specific types of reporting that are seeing different types of reporting now in some instances. So what is your recommendation for either augmenting GA4 with other tech, or at least solving some of the reporting issues that earlier versions of GA were better at?
Yeah, I'm gonna say something that's probably controversial, but I bet that most reports that most people built in Universal Analytics never got looked at or used. So I understand that maybe there's some markers out there who have missed that some things are missing. Um, but the ironic thing is Universal Analytics was around for a good 15 years. Uh, and that's longer than most products survive in general. And so I think we just need to make the shift to GA4 and accept that there's certain things we can't see or look at. It's not the ideal scenario, but let's look at what we can look at and how can we use that information to make or take action, I should say.
Right.
Um, look at clients' backend data, like we were talking about a second ago, right? So whether it's a clients on Shopify or BigCommerce or they have a CRM. So I think trying to augment a lot of that backend data clients have with GA4 or any platform you use is the best path forward. All our clients are still on GA4. I don't think anyone really wants to pay for a separate analytics platform because GA4 is free. Whether they're a $30 million brand or $1 million brand, they both have the same view. Why would I pay for it if I can just get GA4 for free? So I think it's just pulling out what data we can for GA4, then pulling out data from clients' backend systems wherever we can, and merge that data together if we need to, or also have two separate reports. But we try to focus on like building reports that clients are both going to read, but also allows us to take action. I think the challenge we've always had is there's too much data or tons of data, and we built lots of really great reports, but then nobody reads the reports, so no one takes action on the reports. And so I think this GA4 transition has been great, help me figure out like what do we actually want to build reports on and that we're actually going to use versus just doing a lot of digital artifacts or political theater to say you did something, but not actually use those reports in any meaningful way.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously analytics of all types, whether you're talking about GA or sort of in-platform analytics, if you've got a Shopify or Magento, whatever store, is that's what happened in the past, right? So it's, and you want to be able to use it to change direction, and you use it to inform future changes, but it's sort of like trying to drive a car by using the rear view mirror, right? So you also have to be looking ahead. You can't just be looking behind because things are maybe changing within the ecosystem around you.
Mhm.
So one of the challenges that come with GA4 with any analytics or reporting package is that often you can't get the data in GA4 to reconcile against in-platform data that you might have in Shopify or Magento or BigCommerce, or in the case of B2B marketing, any internal analytics in your CRM, whether you're using HubSpot or Salesforce or something else. And so, but yet marketing teams, they would like to have a single source of truth, especially if it's actually true. But
Yeah.
even if it's not 100% census level true, you still need the ability to understand directionally, I made a change in my media and this is what happened on the, in my reporting. So how do you think through with clients sort of what to use as either your single source of truth or your single source of almost true?
Yeah, I mean, all things equal, we usually default to Google Analytics because it's the one thing that at least has all the data from across different marketing channels and platforms. Even try to explain to clients why, potentially data in ad platforms or in like email platforms like Klaviyo may not be accurate. In Klaviyo's case, and a lot of SMS cases, they do a lot of view through conversions. So like no one actually clicked it, they just viewed it. But how do you know they didn't also click on a meta ad or a Google ad or click on, an SEO link before converting? So trying to really get rid of that, a lot of that sort of view through conversions. Because I believe if someone didn't click on your ad, it's a lot harder to maybe replicate that success and get more people to convert. A view is great. I don't think there's not a value with view, but you don't want to run a business based on simply view campaigns. We don't have the issue I think a lot of brands have where they waited to the last minute to set up GA4. We've been setting up GA4 for clients since 2021, whenever we could set up the earliest. And then, as we onboarded clients, last year and this year, we set up GA4 right away for them. And so we're able to look at data at least a year over year for lots of clients, or 2 years over the last 2 years, because we did it just before Q4 of 2021. So that's made it a lot easier from a source of truth perspective.
Right.
I think waiting till last minute is okay if that was your plan. But I think when something like this comes where there's a seismic shift in how you track data, being able to have both of those makes it really helpful, because now I can say, okay, what did numbers look like in UA at that point? What did numbers look like in GA4 at that point? In this case, 2 years ago. I think if you're just setting up GA4 now, it's going to be a lot harder to compare things year over year. And so there's not really much you can do other than say, this is what UA said last year. This is what GA4 says right now. Understanding that most likely GA4 is probably going to have less numbers around, let's say, Google and stuff like that than it would have had in UA, because attribution's different. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, or saying that, Google or Meta is doing worse this year than they did last year. It's just understanding that they attribute data differently, and you can't necessarily do an apples to apples comparison.
Right, right. So you do a lot of e-commerce, and often in e-commerce, you'll be either using shopping feeds, data feeds into Google, but you might also be using those same feeds into some of the social platforms. And in some cases, you might be doing marketplaces like Amazon or Walmart, et cetera. So do you advocate doing sort of seasonal tweaks and adjustments to shopping feeds, or do you basically feel like the feed data should be consistent, but then maybe you just tweak your bidding strategies and algorithms seasonally?
Yeah, so I think it's sort of one of those all of the above to answer the question, in the sense that so the way we work is we do 2 audits a year across each client. So that's like where we do a deep dive to make sure that everything is the way it should be set up in each feed, regardless of what we do day to day, week to week, month to month. Your shopping feed is often underestimated by most people. People often think, I think like what you mentioned, Kevin, you just need to do all your campaign tweaks, everything's fine. But if you have a bad shopping feed, you can't expect to see as good a success in your campaigns. It's like saying, I'm going to just pick whatever keywords I want in a search ad, and I'll just tweak things inside the platform and be okay. But you want to have the best keywords to start, so you also want to have the best shopping feed to start. The way we think about it is, a lot of clients will have events or times of year where they're going to see an uptick in, traffic or sales or conversions. And so before that event happens, so it could be a client, they sell lots of stuff for Father's Day, or you could sell lots of stuff to the LGBT community. So you do a lot of stuff around like the summer and Pride. You could do a lot of stuff for obviously what we have going into North America, Black Friday and Christmas and stuff. And so understanding, so what events a client potentially will see lots of business means at a time we want to like audit the feed and edit the feed to make sure that we can capture the traffic. A good example I always give is we had a client that sold a lot of stuff around Father's Day. And so we edited our feed based on how people would shop for Father's Day's gifts. And that definitely saw us get a lot more traffic than it would have the year before, when we didn't have the client yet, but also allowed us to get more conversions, because a lot of people who search for things around Father's Day or Mother's Day, and sometimes people don't think about those as events, but those are often events that you can capture traffic that your competition won't do. Most people don't spend a lot of time working on their shopping feed because it's quote unquote tedious or boring. But the better you build your shopping feed, whether it's for search or Meta or TikTok, the more likely you can capture the traffic than other people who wouldn't have done those changes. And so, yeah, we're looking at events for clients. We're doing things around seasonality. We're always updating and tweaking our feed. Google, I'd say, every year probably launches 2 or 3 new attributes. In the last couple of years, you saw everything from the short title attribute, product details, product highlight attributes. And so we're always looking to what other attributes can we add to our shopping feed to give Google more data. And so between, new attributes and just normal things we do throughout the year to make sure feeds are staying up to where we want them to be from a standard level, we puts clients sort of in a better position, especially for one of our clients is launching like lots of new products, right? If you're launching lots of new products, well, then you always want to make sure those new products are making it into the feed correctly. Product title is correct, product details, product highlight, product description, all that stuff is correct. That way you have the best chance of both showing up in SERP, but also make sure it goes to the right campaign. We often use a lot of custom labels for our clients. So that's one thing we're always checking to make sure those are being done correctly based on the rules we set up, because it's often, set up a rule, today, a year from now, you want to make sure that rule is still running correctly because of how someone set up something on the store. There could be an edge case where that rule does something to a SKU you don't want it to do. And so even just double checking the rules we have set up in a lot of accounts to make sure things are running correctly is important, because what happened a year ago is a long time in our world, and edge cases often happen.
Right. Absolutely. Well, so what has you excited about 2024? Obviously, clients are starting to plan, at least at the macro level. Budgets get adjusted on a much more narrow basis, week to week, month to month. But given what's happening in the ecosystem and the economy with AI, what has you excited about next year?
Yeah, I find it hard to think about next year because we're in the thick of things with Black Friday. But I think the thing that has me excited every year is that I know things won't be the same, in the sense that there's always going to be some sort of change. And I think it's our opportunity to embrace that changes, big and small, and how we can take that change and help our clients just do a better job. I think a lot of our clients, have stability this year in terms of performance. And so how do we just, build on that stability for those clients who want stability? How do we help clients scale things for clients who are seeing that growth and they want to scale things more? Maybe both in like number of products they put out and also revenue they have coming in to ad spend they're spending. So I think next year is all about trying to hopefully build on successes from this year that clients have seen, and then just know that things won't be the same because Google and Meta and TikTok will all probably put out new stuff that we have to adapt to. That's kept the job interesting as well over the years, right? I think if what we had in 2007 when I got in the industry, or even just in 2018 or 2017, is still existed today, and we had it changed in any way, I think the job would be a lot more boring. I think the other thing is we're seeing a lot more like B2B brands want to get into sort of e-commerce or direct consumer. They built their business on, sales teams and wholesale and stuff like that. So I think the big thing I see for next year, I think, is we'll see a lot more B2B brands want to go down this sort of e-commerce direct consumer route, which is very exciting because I think B2B often doesn't get a lot of attention, but in B2B e-com, I think there's like tons of untapped opportunities. So I'm excited about that a lot for next year.
Yeah, it's that stuff certainly is exciting, and it is interesting to go in there, and we have fun every day, right? So we get to experiment with all the new things every day as they come out. One fun thing, on the educational side for clients who are, transforming their business to be more D2C is, they have to shift to a mindset shift, right? Obviously, they have to put in all the logistics and infrastructure to handle the direct to consumer, but they're not used to having a permission relationship with clients either from a communication strategy perspective. So they don't just have to think about like, how do I allow somebody to buy something and then fulfill it to them? But, how do I talk to them? When do I talk to them? Those kinds of things. And that's really fun to take clients through, is to think through that, think through channel conflict issues, right? Because, they don't want to necessarily piss off their existing channel as they go into direct to consumer as well. So I agree. It's a lot of fun to be in this industry. There continue to be changes every day in the platforms, and that keeps us on our toes on behalf of our clients.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, I often don't know what it would have been if I knew now when I knew in 2007 when I started, but it's been like a wild ride, and we'll see what the next couple years bring.
Well, look forward to seeing you at Brighton and continuing to hear about your progress as you grow your agency. Thanks so much for joining me, Duane.
Well, thanks for having me, Kevin. I appreciate it. It's been fun to chat.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.